All right. This is the Smart Buildings Academy podcast, episode 427. Today, we will discuss how to grow your service business through a collaborative relationship between your frontline technicians and your sales team. My name's Julian Palacios, and joining me today from the Smart Buildings Academy team is Adrian Altine. Good afternoon, Adrian. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Julian. How are you doing today?
I'm great. You love the formality?
I do. I'm excited. I'm excited to be here. Phil's been bugging me for years to get on the podcast, and I've always kind of stepped away from it. But now that he's my boss, I can't get away from it.
Well, yeah, and you're on with me, not with Phil.
That's the
All
truth.
right. So, why don't we start off real quick for the audience, for our listeners, introduce them to who you are. You can touch on a little bit of what you do for Smart Buildings Academy, but let's also focus on your history and, what you've done in your career.
Wow. So it's a long career in the controls industry. I've spent 20 plus years with several different companies. I'm competent with most major brands of controls on the market. Most of my career has been with the service side of the business, dealing with customers. I spent my fair share with construction learning, but moved into service and really enjoyed that business. And as my career has journeyed one way to another and different companies and economics, I ended up with SBA as an account executive for the Midwest, where I can bring this great product that we offer of education in controls to everybody. It's fantastic.
Well, thank you for sharing that and uh, sharing your story a little bit so everyone kind of gets your background. So, where I want to start this episode, start the conversation is because we're talking about sales and ops, salesperson, technician working together on the service side to grow a business and grow it rapidly. And we wanted to talk about this because you and I have done this together a long, long time ago. But let's start kind of the episode and the story with how we met and how we started working together. So, what's your best recollection of how that got going?
So we were both here in Dallas. Um, I had transferred from Atlanta to Fort Worth with Johnson, and then moved to the Dallas market under the service the whole time. And I had been working there and just kind of in the service department, just learned the market. I was kind of new to the area of this metroplex, and that's about the time that I think I we also ran into Phil at that point, across a couple projects because I was a specialist on a couple things for him also. And then I remember you coming into town as part of our growing service sales team, and that
Yeah.
kind of kicked off for you and I starting to work together.
Yeah. For me, I remember moving to Dallas in my 20s. Hey, you're going to go into sales and grow this business. And so I moved down there uh, only weeks before the Lehman Brothers crash and the kind of the onset of that Great Recession back in '08, '09 time period. And I remember starting off getting a little lucky, a couple beginner's luck, quick wins. But then after all that economic turmoil, suddenly having some issues, could talk to everybody. Everybody wanted to meet and talk. Everyone had time for that. Nobody had the purchase authority to issue a PO for a while. So it was kind of dark days at that time. And I remember sitting in my cube and some bald guy with glasses coming up to my cube in a technician's uniform asking me, "What the heck am I doing in the office? Why aren't I out seeing customers?" And for me, that's when we first had like our first real conversation.
Yeah, it was, and I was kind of in the same boat with you. Is that with everything slowing down, with the economy, even my work slowed down, and I had a toddler and a newborn, and they were there was technicians that weren't making hours, and so honestly, I looked at you like, why aren't you out there selling? I'll do whatever, just go out there and sell. And that really was where we kind of came together. Is that I I needed more work, and you were needing some help, getting your feet wet with some of the customers.
Yeah, it was interesting. You use the term getting some hours. And for those not familiar, I learned very quickly the most important thing was for a technician to have 40 hours of work minimum every week, right? Because you had your financial goals and they were dependent on billable hours, having service calls to run or repair work to do or project work to do. That was a big deal. And that economic, time period, or that time period in the economy when we met, that became something that you and everybody else started to worry about, and that was tough. So after that first meeting, right after, hey, what are you doing? We got to know each other. I told you a lot about what accounts I was supposed to cover and what I was doing. You gave me some leads, as good technicians do. They're probably the best source of leads in any organization. Um, you and I still talk about one of our first sales calls together, where it was the first time we were in front of a third party, right, in front of a customer,
Yeah.
uh, having a conversation with that customer together, and it's memorable for both of us for different reasons. So for the audience, just to paint a picture, it's a healthcare facility in this time period, with some challenges operating a newer building that just got finished and turned over to them. Like, I'll paint that picture. So, why don't we start with your version of the story? Because I always find it rather humorous how you put things.
So, this was a project where the initial build out of this, it was a clinic. Um, they initially set everything up standalone, so there was no communications trunk between everything, and so we were going out there to kind of present adding to the system and bringing it more into like an overall BAS system. And so, we were in presenting process of this, and I suggested to the customer then suggested, he says, "Oh, you know what? I don't want to use discharge air sensors on anything. I pay guys to go and check the temperature coming out of the vents, and I give them an infrared gun. And at this point in time, I don't think we need discharge air sensors on anything." And literally at this point, my brain just locks up. I'm so logical, and I know all about controls, and I'm very atypical at that point, and I just couldn't get over the point. I was stuttering. I started kind of staring and even standing up a little bit at one point, and like leaning to the table. And that's about the point Julian's like, "Well, let me interject here." And so Julian then takes over the meeting, and literally just the smoothest uh, customer handling I had ever seen. I'd never seen anybody do it. Being a tech, I never got to see how the salesmen interacted, or the managers at that interacted with the customers, and it was eye opening.
Yeah, so let's peel back that onion a little bit, because I do remember I felt like you were just almost offended that he would do such a thing as run around with people and not invest in product or technology to solve a problem. And honestly, that wouldn't be the first time in my career I've run into that issue. Um, but what you call smooth, I call, amateur at this point, what I did back in those days. But it was just a matter of wanting to understand why, right? And to be fair to the audience, like, I think we were presenting too early, right? I was early in my sales career, so I hadn't fully qualified that opportunity at the time. But
Yeah.
we're talking, proposal and price, and we're getting pushback and objections. And it was interesting for me, we were getting objections, um, on something where, previously the customer had said, "Hey, this building, this is a problem and I need you to solve it." So we had a solution and now I'm getting pushback. Um, and I recall distinctly just starting to go into the whys, right? Trying to understand, okay, I hear you, and plain dumb in a way. Like, I just don't understand why you would do that. Why would you have a guy walk around shooting the gun and measuring temp that way when you could just sit here and see it for all your zones, from the comfort of your office? Right? And why would you do this other thing? And so on and so forth. And if you recall, the issue wasn't so much the logic of the solution. The issue was it was a recently finished project, and he finally shared, because we made him comfortable enough at that point, that there was just hurdles he'd have to go jump over to fund any more investment in a what is essentially like a brand new facility, right? It was brand new. Why do we need to put money into it already? And so we had to work with him on resolving that particular issue, um, and shaping what package we put together so that he could sell it internally, which is what a lot of building owners have to do. For you, that was something you, prior to that experience as a technician, did you think about that often? Like what the
Um,
owners gotta go through, their process?
no, I was, at the time I was very technical oriented. I know that now. I know now. Looking back on it, I can only imagine that the customers had to look at me like I had a third eye. I was doing like magic tricks to get stuff done. I to me, what was logical steps, every single step to them was is just crazy. They couldn't figure it out. I never stopped to really understand the customer or from the customer's standpoint. And I never really looked from beyond the repair in front of me to what drives the customer and what problems does the customer have. And a lot of us, we deal in facilities, or with facilities people, and it's they have more than just HVAC stuff going on. They got lighting problems and they got sprinkler issues, and there's politics and there's people going after their jobs. I mean, it's they they're not just one broken part. There's more to it than that. And this meeting really kind of opened me up to that understanding. And I had no idea before we that I would ever see something like that. And then you kind of carried me down the road after that.
Well, I had to, not for your benefit, but for my own, because from, my perspective, if we turn the tables a little bit, as a salesperson who's wet behind the ears, new to the industry at the time, I remember distinctly, because of training I had gone through, I understood a chiller, right? Um, but I couldn't name all the components on a rooftop unit. And controls was like this thing we sold. Like it's a computer system, right? Like that was that
Yeah.
was originally what I had thought. And so for me, facing, feeling like an imposter in all these meetings with customers trying to grow a business, I had to quickly improve my technical knowledge so I had some technical credibility. Because in sales to succeed in this space, you need both sales talent, good intuition, and some technical credibility. I always, you can't be the guy standing in the central plant asking when you got a new chiller and you're looking at the boiler, which I've actually seen happen. So that's tough. That's tough to recover from that from a credibility standpoint. So working with you, I would ask questions, and I don't remember if this drove you nuts or what, but I think I would talk to you 3 or 4 times a day after leaving customer sites. It's like, "Hey, I saw this, and this, which I got. I understand all that, but why can't this work? or why did this get installed a certain way? Um, or how here's their problem, how would we deal with it? Right. And working with you hand in hand accelerated my development from a technical standpoint. So there was benefit to both sides, right?
Oh yeah.
So
I
then,
mean, it.
go ahead.
Go
Sorry,
ahead.
I've interrupted your thought.
Yeah, it really it opened my eyes to more of, as a technician, I really thought that the business, as a technician, a lot of the times you really got to thinking um, that the business revolves around you because you're out on the front line and all that, and you're super duper important. When you really need to understand how important that your office people are and how important your sales team is because at the end of the day, is without any sales, nobody has a job.
Hmm.
And you really were able to paint that picture that, and it kind of it all started out the rest of my career. Even once you transferred out, and when we went our separate ways at the time, it carried the rest of my career. Back to went into sales, and now I'm back in sales. It's fantastic. But
Yeah.
yeah, it really shaped me.
Well, imagine me being 20, mid 20s, uh, and this adult man, right, is standing at my cube telling me, go sell something. I got two kids at home. And if I don't get my 40, this is going to be a problem. So that was, for me, that was eye opening because it became real. What I was told became real. And I was told for a long time in college and then early in my career, sales is the lifeblood of a business. And I didn't realize how important it is and how much lifeblood it is in more ways than one. So let's fast forward. So we met, we had that experience, but fast forward a couple months, we figured each other out a little bit, and so and the economy started to come back, and back then there was different programs for energy efficiency, similar to today, where there's government funding and incentives, and utility companies started offering incentives. So you and I eventually got into a groove, working together. People made fun of us a little bit because we were inseparable, and um, we used to laugh about the button down and the Carhartt wearing guy. The sales process we had.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what was that, in your words, what was that sales process? What was our relationship dynamic like between us and our customers?
So, we worked hand in hand to kind of resolve all the customers' needs. Um, like I said, I could go out and make the system do whatever we wanted, whatever the customer wanted, whatever you needed me to make it do. I knew how to do that part. Um, but you were kind of able to put me into this position to where knew where you were going to propose for the customer or what you were working for the customers, next year budget. And then I knew when the right times to talk to them were and bring things up. And I have a funny story about it when I was doing sales at another company, and I was a salesman, and I didn't have the great relationship with my tech, but the techs hated the new software that came out that year, and they were bad mouthing into the customer, and I was trying to sell it to the customer. And I got to realizing is that I need to take this guy out to lunch and dinner, and get him on my team, and kind of pull that relationship like you and I had, so that we're not fighting each other. And if I shouldn't be selling the software, let me know. So it really helped position me, moving on in my career. So, and then Annette Johnson, you're right. We were inseparable. We were this, we the one thing about being in service is that if you sell enough time, you don't get service calls anymore. You just do your own work. And I literally was just doing all of your work and all those customers all the time. And then some. We got so many customers, I was almost doing 60 hours a week. And the other guys were having a hard time making 40. So once the market bounced back, we super got busy.
Mhm.
and it really, the company, started doing some great things. The one of the problems is the company had these little reward projects that they would do, kind of what do they call them, spiffs,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I would just destroy every spiff from a technician technician
Yeah, I think I
standpoint.
remember you maxing out all the time.
I did. They
So
had that one. They had one where they had to take a picture. I had to take a picture in front of something and post it on this wall, and they got so tired of seeing my picture on the wall, and I covered like the entire wall with just my pictures that they ended up just stopping it. We're like, this is no more of this.
well, so let's peel back. So one of the things you touched on is really for the listeners is communication. I made it a point to tell you what my strategy was at every account that we shared, right? Where I was the sales rep and you were the tech that primarily handled that account and did the service calls on that account.
Yeah,
And you were not shy about telling me when you thought my plan was not smart, right? You were not shy about adding ideas to the plan, saying, "Hey, Julian, that's a good idea, but you're not going far enough. You should think about this, this, and this." Um, and having that communication together, I think, was one of the biggest drivers of what we did and what made us successful. Is you were on a job site, any job site, and you either knew already or you'd call me on your way and just say, "Hey, I'm headed here for service call. Something broke, whatever," or it's scheduled service visit. It's a quarterly visit, monthly visit, whatever it was. Is there anything I need to know? Is there anything you need to know? You'd ask me that. And I remember like, yeah, it'd be awesome if, I knew this bit of information because I'm there's a hurdle, there's something that's slowing the sale down and I just can't figure it out. So ask a couple questions, see what the guys share with you. Because we learned customers shared information with you that they wouldn't share with me.
and vice
So,
versa. They
uh-huh.
wouldn't share budget stuff or that higher level management stuff. They wouldn't share it with me. They never felt comfortable. But it was kind of hand in hand. So we just
Yeah.
kept our communications up, and it ended up working out for us.
Well, it was interesting too. I remember it being a little, I don't want offended's too strong of a word, but just it wasn't a great feeling the first time I realized I'd send a proposal to a customer with a recommendation. You should do XYZ. And I didn't get feedback right away because that decision maker checked with his or her right hand person. And then they waited for you to show up and they asked you if they should do it. And you, as the frontline technician, you could have, if you answered the wrong way, torpedoed the deal for me. But because we were open and communicating and aligned, which I think is super important,
Yeah,
um, you helped convince them to either buy or to come back and ask for more,
yeah.
which was fantastic way to grow the business. So we did this for a couple of years. I think what's important is sharing with the listeners what did we learn? What did we learn from working together, collaborating between sales and ops? What did you start doing differently in your role at the time? And I can share what I started doing differently. So why don't we go with you first?
So I started instead of approaching a service call, I'd go onto my service calls like I had normally, but instead of just walking out on the service call and fixing the one broke problem, I learned to kind of look around, look at everything, look at anything from lighting not working to, are they getting alarms? When was the last time they were backed up? Just bigger things that, in at the time, service wasn't really addressing. We weren't looking around at the customer and seeing, do they have a mechanical need or is there Is their chiller sounds awful. I never thought about anything except the one VAV box that I was going to go fix. Um, but working with you and you looking at everything, it really kind of let me, lend itself to me to look at it kind of before you got there and then talk to the customer, kind of have that pre conversation. And then easy, the other nice one is that the customer is generally a captive audience for me. As a technician, they want to hear what I have to say. I'm the subject matter expert. And so,
Hmm.
that's a lot of the times he and I would talk and we'd come up with some ideas. And then I would call you and I'd say, hey, come meet us for lunch at XYZ. And, bring your laptop because you're going to have to start writing some proposals. Um, but, I knew working with you that, we were just such a great team in the way we worked together. And, you know, uh, I respected your talent and you respected mine. And so we had this mutual respect for each other that, and it wasn't always there. There were sometimes we didn't trust each other, but we worked it out. As time went on and as deals progressed, and you know, we always did the right thing by the customers, and the customers knew that, and they loved working with us. We had several customers that just they expected to see us together all the time.
Yeah,
So
yeah, for sure. Well, and
yeah,
on
it was
the
good.
on the conflict side of things, there's nothing like either sitting down for a cold one, and I'm not going to give a free ad to any restaurant or bar here, but or sharing a meal together to get aligned, right? Whether it was breakfast, lunch, or dinner. Like, okay, we're
Yep.
not on the same page. Let's get together in person and figure out why.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's interesting. Like, you were talking about one of the lessons learned was looking at everything, right? And for me, I knew in my role, I had to look at everything, but I didn't know what I was looking at. And I didn't know what I was looking for, right? I needed to learn to improve and increase my technical acumen at the time. So I knew what to look for, which dots to connect, where there was real opportunity, where there wasn't. Um, and so that was huge for me early on in our relationship was that piece of it. Later on, after, incentives and things like that started popping up, you were so busy, like most technicians, you were not going to sit at home and read the latest um, bill that just got passed into law that provided utility incentives, or you're not going to read the monthly updates from the utility company about what can a building owner do and how can they get free money. So I did those things, right? Or I got that information from other resources in the business. And um, I learned that it's really important to share that information with someone, with a technician like you, right? Hey, Adrian, did you know that the utility company is offering XYZ incentive for, you know, p-
Lighting
um,
retrofits.
lighting retrofits, new thermostats, improved operational control, and the definition of improved is kind of nebulous. So we could write a lot of different things into that and get credit for it. And feeding you these nuggets of information, immediately I got feedback of you would tell me which customers, which sites, etc. So it's just this again, I go back to the word collaboration and communication because I think that was that those two things are what set us on the path to do what we did. And for
Well,
me, what it changed for me as a salesperson, it it changed my perspective, right? Initially, I mentioned that earlier, like realizing if I hit my number, it's not just a certain number of employees who have job security, but their families have economic security, right? So hitting my number, I wasn't feeding myself or my family, I was feeding many, right? And that is critically important to do as a sales professional. So it turned it from a like job to a calling, which I've kind of been in and out of that calling the rest of my career. Um, the other thing it did for me, like I always had this perception of in any business, like the people closest to the customer are critically important, people. in our business, I recognize incredibly important technicians, how incredibly important technicians are to the business from the standpoint of having a sustainable organization that can grow, a sustainable business. Um, they are probably the best source of leads. I mentioned that earlier. Technicians, informally help the development of the entire organization from a technical standpoint. Technicians help mitigate risk because you're not going to go do something on a site you're not comfortable with or implement a new product that you don't know everything about, whether it's software or hardware. So technicians do a lot for businesses in our industry, and it just is like it's not always really obvious or seen. And going through the experience with you, I got to see that. So again, it really did change how I approach things because of that different perspective. Um, when we talk about the text listening right now, right? Or anybody, and if you are listening right now and you're in chat, feel free to throw in a question or two. We'll have time here at the end to answer them. Um, but if you think about the technician listening right now, Adrian, 1 to 2 pieces of advice or action items they can go do tomorrow, what would you
So,
say?
so the first one, obviously, know who your account manager is. If you're going out to accounts and you're seeing customers, you have to know who are the account managers for that. I know we worked at a large company, so there was 6 different account managers. It was a big metroplex, but know who they are. And then the second thing is find out what they're working on, and you can then kind of understand what they're presenting to the customer, because rarely do you see the salesman and the technician where they ever, before Julian and I kind of did this, rarely would you see the salesman and the technician on the job site at the same time. So a lot of the time your account manager's out making presentations and you have no idea what he's presenting. um, that leads to that whole thing of knowing what you're selling, and then try to understand what's important to your customer, not just the problem in front of you. Keep your eyes open.
No, that's great advice. I think what I would tell sales professionals who are out there listening, what you should do tomorrow or tonight on your way home is very similar. Who are the techs that are going out to your customer sites, who are interacting with your customers the most when you're not around? They will have a disproportionate impact on whether or not your account strategy will be successful, right? And so the number one thing I would say is identify who you need to have a very collaborative working relationship with and start building that relationship if you haven't already. So that'd be action item number one. I think action item number two, um, for sales, assuming you got a healthy pipeline, some of you might have some opportunities that are stalled, and they could be stalled for a number of reasons, but let's make sure one of those reasons isn't, the customer's just not sure and they're waiting for a trusted advisor to tell them it's okay to move forward. So look at some of your stalled deals and figure out who the technician is at those sites who could bring some added potential credibility, or who might have some insight. You don't know until you ask. So you might as well ask your tech, hey, I have this proposal, this scope of work proposed to this customer. Thought they were hot to trot, but it's been kind of slow going. Haven't heard back. Have you been to the site? Have you heard anything? Do you know what's going on there? You know, that kind of information, I can't tell you how often it's incredibly useful. So do not hesitate to communicate early and often with your tech team. That would be my advice.
Hey, on that same note, the other thing that you and I used to do was when you tell me that you had 3 or 4 proposals out to a customer, when I'd show up the next time, I'd be like, "Oh, hey, I heard you guys were looking at getting a new chiller. how's that going? Or, hey, you guys are thinking about getting an upgrade. That's fantastic. And, kind of precipice that conversation, and then they get a little bit more relaxed about it.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully get some of that pipeline unstuck.
Oh, for sure. Well, Adrian, this has been a fun conversation reminiscing with you. Really appreciate you taking the time to join.
Not a problem. Thank you for paying me.
Yeah, no problem. Hey, for those of you listening, real quick, do want to highlight a couple things this week at the end of this episode here. Number one, if you missed it, check out LinkedIn and on our website. We've launched a new course for building owner operators, which are kind of the customers we've been talking about today. It's our building operations management course. We have it available through our early access program. Early access means that you're going to be getting the course um, in, let's call it beta phase, participate, take the course. You're able to provide us feedback that, as many of you know, we listen to and make changes. And then when the course is final and complete, then you get to keep your access for another full year to the final material as part of that program. And you get access to the course at a significant discount that is available for 40% off to the first 100 people who sign up for our early access program to that building operations management course. So check that out. And then outside of that, Memorial Day is coming up. This weekend, we're having our Memorial Day sale. So courses and certificate pass will be on sale on the website through e-commerce at a 30% off discount. And if you haven't seen, we've relaunched, or announced, sorry, the next wave of dates for our workforce development program, where we take folks from outside the industry and turn them into install and startup technicians for you inside of 12 weeks. We've had a very, very successful four core cohorts over the last 12 months. And so we're announcing 4 more dates starting in August. And that Memorial Day sale will include a sale on seats into the workforce development program. Those will be discounted at 20%. Those will not be available on the website. Please do email our support email or check in with your sales rep to get a quote on that. But we also will be having that as part of the Memorial Day sale. So check all those things out. We really do appreciate your time, energy in engaging with us, your feedback, and listening to the podcast. We value you all very much. Thank you for listening. Adrian, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Everybody have a great evening, afternoon, and a good week. Take it easy.